Shalom Aleichem, my dear friends. This is Menachem Nissel, live in Yerushalayim, the holy city. Today we have a special treat in honor of Chanukah. We're going to be doing what we've been doing over the last few years, which is basically this time of the year. We learn a sugya in Chanukah. We're learning Masechet Shabbos. Those of you who are not part of the Chabura, we learn Masechet Shabbos together. And today we're going to be learning Daf Kaf Gimel Amud Aleph, the second parak of Shabbos. Just a little bit of a background for everybody. The nature of the discussions about Chanukah is a bit of a paradox. What do I mean? On the one hand, you have tons and tons and tons of writings in the last 1,000 years from the Rishonim onwards that talk about Chanukah. For example, the Hasidic movement, every single one of the great writers, when it comes to Chanukah, they literally go to town. And the Bnei Yissaschar, which goes through the Jewish months, when it comes to Chanukah, by far he has the most writings. Reb Tzadok to Shem Shmuel, all the great masters have what to say about Chanukah. My own Rebbe, Reb Meiri Shapiro, I'm looking over here at his farm. When it comes to Chanukah, there's no question that it's number one. When it comes to the original sources, so there we have no Mishnayos about Chanukah. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi chose not to write a Masechta on Chanukah. A lot of discussion why. When it comes to Gemara, the Talmud only speaks about Chanukah, Agav Orcha, in passing, when we talk about the Neiros of Shabbos, which means that in the second parak of Shabbos, which is Bamei Madlikim, it talks about how to light Shabbos candles, what kind of oils you're supposed to use, what you can use, what you cannot use, the reasons behind it. And Agav Orcha, on its way, we also mention for 2 pages the laws of Chanukah. This is the only Talmudic source of Chanukah. Almost nothing is mentioned in the Mishnayos, and almost no other place in the Talmud do we see discussions about Chanukah. For people like me, this is great, because it means I can give over my own stuff, which is what I'm going to do today. I'm going to take a line of Gemara that's pretty obscure. We're going to ask questions, and we're going to take it on 2 different levels. First is to understand what the Gemara is teaching us, to understand the Rishonim, how they discuss it, and then we're going to fly into the deeper dimension of what's going on. And finally, I hope to bring it all home so that this Sunday night, when we light our little candles, it's going to be a little bit more meaningful and a little bit more personal. So let's begin at the beginning. If you have a look on page 23a, those of you that have the Gemara in front of you, the Gemara says about 1/3 down the page, a statement of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. If you don't have a Gemara in front of you, it's going to be just fine. The Gemara brings down, and I quote, Kol hashmonim kulon yafin l'ner. All types of oil is perfectly good for your candles, which means you can choose any form of fuel that you want. As you probably know, those of you listening in America and Canada now, so the most common is wax, candle wax, those little candles burning bright, made out of candle wax. But the Gemara continues a statement of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, V'shemen zayis min hamuvcha. Shemen zayis, olive oil, min hamuvcha, that is the preferred one. So we see over here a statement of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. If you have a choice of fuel, what to use for your Chanukah candles, what's best is shemen zayis. Now, I'm just going to make a point to you that we're going to see in a moment that it's not obvious that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi is talking about Chanukah. He could be talking about Shabbos as well. He could be saying that on Shabbos, the mitzvah min hamuvcha is to use shemen zayis. And here in Israel, it's very common. You go to people's homes and you see that they use shemen zayis only. I just spoke it over today with my second son, Yaakov Yisrael. He told me they always use shemen zayis. The Gemara on the next page talks about people who are careful with every single hitter that they can find when it comes to lighting candles on Shabbos. They're guaranteed beautiful children. They're guaranteed sons. having them born different. They're going to have children who are male. All kinds of schools that exist when it comes to talking about Shem and Zayis. But here the Gemara makes an unequivocal statement in the middle of the sugya of Chanukah, and we're going to see in a moment that the simple understanding is that we're referring over here to Chanukah. Now comes the Gemara and says something extraordinary. Amar Abaya, says Abaya, and I quote, Mireish, in the beginning, Havi Mahadamar Amashcha de Shumshimi. My teacher, my master, who is Abaya's master? Rabbah, the great Amira, the great teacher Rabbah. He was careful to always use sesame oil. So this is very exciting. We find out that the leader of the generation, he had choices and he chose to use sesame oil. Could be he was a Sesame Street fan. It could be that he had some deep Kabbalistic reasons. We're going to see in a moment, but that's what he used, sesame oil. Amma, he explains, Haimashach Nahira Tvei. The reason why I do it is because it lasts longer. Mashich Nahira, its light will last longer, which means if you have X amount of olive oil or X amount of sesame oil, so the sesame oil will last longer than the olive oil or any other oil for that matter. It has the greatest, what's called punch for its size. It has the most longevity of any oil that is out there for the quantity that you put in. So if you have whatever your 10 cc of whatever your 10 milliliters of oil, the olive oil will last less than the shumshmi oil, than the sesame oil. Kevin the Shamalei Lahad Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, when he heard that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi had said, you know what's best? What's best is to use olive oil. Mahara amashcha dezesa, he changed his mind and used mashcha dezesa, which is olive oil. Ama haitzalu nahir tvei. This has a more tzalil oil. The oil burns more beautifully, more powerfully, more clearly. So let me summarize what just happened over here. You have over here a Gemara. The Gemara says, that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says, choose olive oil. Then comes Abaya and says, originally my teacher used to use sesame oil, and then he switched to olive oil. What was the reason? Sesame oil lasts longer, has more longevity. Olive oil has got a prettier light. That's what the Gemara says over here. Rashi doesn't help us. Rashi doesn't say anything. But Tesis over here says, and I quote, Nira da'aner Chanukah koi. This discussion, says Tesis, is not referring to Shabbos. It's referring to Chanukah. Umishum taima demasik denafish nahar tvei. And the reason is because we are talking about the quality of light. Avalaner Shabbos pshita the Shem and Zayis mitzvah mivcha. Everyone knows you should use Shem and Zayis. Why? Lefi shenimshach acha psila tvei mikulei kedemucha b'masnisin the kula motibe b'demadlikin. The Mishnah at the beginning of this parak, this Mishnah, for me it's already Friday, so it's already tomorrow morning for me. So tonight I'm going to be saying Bama Madlikim. I'm going to be saying this parak of Mishnayos, and I'm going to be saying that you know why we use Shem and Zayis? Because the psil, the wick, fits beautifully with the oil. It's never messy, and therefore it is easy to use. And you should know, Tesis is implying that it's very important on Shabbos that you use a fuel that goes well with the wick. So you shouldn't chas v'shalom come to mess around with the wick on Shabbos, and you cause the malach of havara. You start to increase the flow of oil, so therefore it goes even stronger on Shabbos. You're creating a fire. So therefore on Shabbos, the reason why we use olive oil is because it is easier to use. Then on Chanukah, our Gemara teaches us there's another reason. It has a clearer light, and that is more important than sesame that lasts longer. Okay, so for those of you who are not used to me teaching Gemara, So it comes out that if you're listening between the lines, everything I've said so far is extremely technical. We have over here 3 separate points that we've made. One is what lasts longer. Second, what is clearer. And third, what is easier to use. We're going to see in a moment that the elephant in the room is not discussed at all on this page. Everything we've said so far sounds extremely, extremely technical. And you could correctly ask the question, why do we begin and start off by saying, you know what's important? Whatever lasts longer. And then we say, no, 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 no. You know what's important? Whatever is clearer. I learn in the mornings here in Harnof, a couple of minutes from where I'm sitting, there's a Beit Knesset called the Beit Knesset of Rabbi Reuben. Unfortunately became famous, the home of the Harnof massacre, but it's also the place where I daven every single, I daven there, but I learn there every single morning. And I have a charusa with a fellow called Heshi Stark. He's from Chicago. I don't know if anyone's listening from Chicago. Jeremy, are you out there? But he's from Chicago. And he told me that by chance, this Gemara is what he spoke about for his bar mitzvah. I'm not going to tell you how old he is. He's in his 60s. He's an old Joe. And when he was 13 years old, there was a great tzaddik in Chicago called the Weitzner Rebbe. So I actually looked him up a little bit. He was apparently a legend. The Weitzner Rebbe was from a place called Weitzner, which is a city in Hungary. And he managed to get out after the war. He came straight to Chicago. And he was one of the big builders of Hasidus in Chicago. My Charusa's father, Rav Heshi Stark's father, was a Holocaust survivor. There's actually a book about how he survived the Holocaust as a child. And he became a chassid of the Weitzner Rebbe. And he asked the Weitzner Rebbe, could you write my son a bar mitzvah drasha? It just worked out. There happens to be that it's over Chanukah. So the Rebbe spoke about this Gemara. By chance, it was what I was learning. And he said something very cute. It's just a beautiful idea. He said, what does it mean that in the beginning, we were looking for the oil that lasts longer, and then we look for the oil that is even brighter? So he said that this is based on the famous question of the Beis Yosef. So everyone here knows the Beis Yosef asked the question, why is it that we light for 8 days? We should light for 7 days, because we're lighting to commemorate the miracle. The first day, there was no miracle. The first day, they had exactly enough for 1 day. That was not a miracle. The miracle is that it lasts for another 7 days. So let's commemorate the other 7 days. There's actually a book that you can buy in your stores called Ner L'Mea, which brings down 100 famous answers. But the Beis Yosef himself, Rabbi Yosef Karo, the Mechaber, Morona Mechaber, he brings a bunch of answers, and 2 of them are famous. 2 of the answers that he gives fits in exactly to our Gemara over here. One answer that he gives is that day 1 was also a miracle. You know why? Because the Chashmonaim placed 1/8 of what they had into the menorah, and they asked the Kadosh Baruch Hu for a nace. So 1/8 could last the full night long. The other answer that's given is that no, that's not what they did. The Beis Yosef says they took the wick that they had, the one that they normally use for the menachos, for the menorah, and they split it 8 ways. Now, what happens if you take your wick and you divide it into 8 ways? So it's going to last the same amount of time, but the quality of what you're doing is going to be only 1/8 as strong. What was the miracle? The miracle was that even though they used very, very thin and delicate wicks, it still burned brightly as if it was 8 times stronger. So every single day was a miracle. Comes out that these 2 answered the Beis Yosef. The first one is about the continuity, the length of the miracle. 1/8 managed to last as if it was 8 times as much in quantity. And the other 1/8 of the wick gave the quality as if it was 8 times bigger. Says the Weitzner Rebbe, that's exactly the two answers that Abaye gives over here. In the beginning, we used sesame. Sesame lasted longer. Then we found out, no, don't go for the quantity. Rather, you should go for the quality. So some of you are thinking to yourselves, hey, wait a second. What's this whole business about it should go longer? I don't get this. If your problem today is that you want to have that thing which goes longer, so use olive oil and add a little bit more, and then you're going to have something that lasts for a little bit longer. Honestly, that's not a good answer, but it's not a good question, but I asked that question instantly and I thought about it. Well, wait a second. We're looking for a very specific point over here. We're looking for the nature of the power of oil. Do we look at the quality of how long it lasts, or the quality of how bright it actually goes? So there's a incredible observation from the Brisker Rav. How do I know about this? Rav Moshe Sternbuch, who lives here in Har Nof, he should be well and healthy. He heard this from the Brisker Rav, and it turns out that Shumshami, I actually spent yesterday thinking a lot about the nature of sesame. So way before Sesame Street came on, Shumshami was a staple in places like India. Sesame was all over the Middle East as well. And to this very day, I found out last night that there's a lot of medical pluses about the nature of sesame. I went online and I saw whatever 10 health benefits of adding sesame to your diet. Don't just sprinkle them on your challah, but you should actually, especially people my age, it's good for your whatever, your cholesterol and for your blood pressure and all kinds of cool things. But one of the things they mention about sesame is that sesame is the tiniest of the tiniest seeds. Honestly, in the Gemara, when the Gemara wants to talk about something that's small, some of you are aware that the opening Gemara in Elam Mitzias, it talks about scattering sesame and recovering it. So sesame is the example of a teeny weeny little product that you find in the marketplace. And yet, in that tiny seed is a huge quantity of oil. And sesame has a high percentage. It's a very oily little seed. So you have something that's tiny that is very, very concentrated with oil. Says the Brisker Rav, Rabbi Yitzchak Zev Soloveitchik, Sesame Street is a perfect example of the miracle that happened with Chanukah. Yes, something very small that contains a lot of oil inside of it. So the actual nature of the humble sesame is that the word itself, the nature of the sesame seed itself sort of implies its power, that a small amount can contain a lot. That's the Chanukah miracle. The Brisker Rav says you see in sesame a, so to speak, a marshal for the Chanukah miracle. I thought to myself that the word for sesame is shumshum, and in Aramaic it's shumshamin. It sounds like in that word shumshamin, it sounds something that's very oily. You see the word shemen in the word itself. The bottom line is that the choice of sesame oil is not just random. The choice of sesame was done on purpose, and what we're looking for is this quality of a seed that lasts for a long amount of time. The Gemara says, no, we're going for the shemen zayis. Why? What's the big deal about shemen zayis? The Gemara says, because it has a very beautiful light that comes out. Okay, so I want to ask a very simple question over here. This is something that should be all bothering you. Those of you listening, you're thinking to yourself, well, wait a second. Okay, you've mentioned three things about oil: the longevity, the quality, and Tesis brings down how well it goes together with the wick. What is the great elephant in the room? What is not being talked about in the Gemara in Shabbos Kaf Gimel Amud Aleph? It's not mentioned at all. What's the topic that should be spoken about and is not being spoken about? The answer is that Rabbi Shua ben Levi says it's a special mitzvah to use olive oil. Why don't you say that the reason why you should use olive oil, because that was the nature of the miracle in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, in the Chanukah story. The Chanukah story was in the Beis Hamikdash. The Chanukah miracle was all about the menorah that was right there in the Kodesh. The Greeks defiled it. We came along. We found that all the oils had been defiled. We found this one magical vial that was hidden away that goes back as the Megillah Antiochus is from the times of the Beis Din of Shmuel Hanavi, and it was sealed. And we were Meisa Nefesh to use that. We didn't want to use anything that was B'di'evet. And it lasted, instead of 1 day, it lasted for 8 days. Why don't we say, use Shem and Zayis? Because that was the original miracle. Simple answer. Nowhere on this whole page do we see any mention of what happened in the original miracle of Chanukah as a reason why Shem and Zayis is mitzvah min hamuvcha. So I have in front of me over here, I have behind me, the Rambam, right? The Rambam, let's see what he has to say. The Rambam has a commentary on all of Shas. It's brought down Lahalacha in his Mishnah Torah. Let's see what reason does he give for using Shem and Zayis. But before we do that, okay, where are you, Reb Dave? This is for you. For those of you that don't get it, it's 6:25 in the morning over here. This is my cup of coffee, early morning. And yes, it's dark outside. The Vasikin is happening now in a few minutes. Let's get back to the Rambam. What does the Rambam have to say about Shem and Zayis? And the answer is absolutely nothing. It's not there. Oh my gosh. Go to the Rambam, Hilchas Chanukah. Hilchas Chanukah is 2 prakim long. It's 2 chapters long. And go through it. The first chapter begins with a description of the miracle. It goes on to talk about the laws of Hallel. The second chapter talks about the laws of how to light the candles. Nowhere does it mention anywhere the mitzvah of Shem and Zayis. It's probably a mistake. It cannot be that the Rambam doesn't say that you should use Shem and Zayis. The Gemara says it's a mitzvah min hamuvcha. Why doesn't the Rambam mention it? You know what? It gets worse. Because you'll think, okay, so maybe the Rambam, I don't know, he's always got some reason, but at least the Torah, the famous Torah that brings down basically all the Rishonim before the Torah came along, he gathers them all, the Rif, the Rambam, the Rosh, he brings down all the different opinions. He's going to mention that for Chanukah, you should use Shem and Zayis. No, senor. He does not say anything either. Maybe the Mechaber, the Shulchan Aruch, Marana Mechaber. Okay, here we got it. I've got my little Mishnah Berurah over here. Let's see what he has to say. Tov, Reish, Ayin, Gimel, Kol Hashmonim, V'Apsiles Kisherim L'nei Chanukah. You can use any oil and any wick. They're all kosher for Chanukah. V'af al pi she'ein hashmonim nimshachim v'chapsila ve'eina hanitli yafa b'oisem hapsilas. Even although it doesn't flow properly, we're not worried, because on Shabbos we are worried because you may mess around with the oil and cause it to, so to speak, create a bigger flame on Shabbos, which is forbidden. On Chanukah, we're not worried about it because you're not supposed to benefit from the oil on Chanukah anyhow. We're not worried, and therefore the halacha is you can use any oil and any psila, any wick, and any oil, and that's how the Mechaber ends. What is going on over here? It happens to be, okay, sneak preview, the Ramah. This is Rav Moshe Isserles representing Ashkenaz Jewry. He says, nevertheless, Amihu, Shemen, Zayis, Mitzvah, Min HaMuvcha. So you have to wait till the 16th century. You have over here, the Ramah mentions that this is the halacha, and then you have over here, who does he quote? He quotes the Mordechai, and the Kolboy, and the Maril. Beautiful, okay, that you should use Mitzvah Min HaMuvcha, it's to use Shem and Zayis. But this is absolutely ridiculous that the Rambam and the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch don't mention it. What is going on over here? So for those of you that are Rambam experts, let's try and figure out what's the secret over here. the simplest answer, which is probably the most shot, right? Simple answer. Obviously, I'm going to give something different. That's what I'm being paid to do. But the simple answer over here is that the Rambam doesn't mention it because the Rambam learned the Gemara, and he says, okay, it's beautiful. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says this, but this is already on Daf 23a, and this is not the Chanukah Sugya on page 21b, and this is not actually referring to Chanukah at all. This is actually Hilchos Shabbos. Who says that the Rambam has to follow the narrative of Tosfos and say this is talking about Chanukah? No, this is talking about Hilchos Shabbos. And in Hilchos Shabbos, there you should use Shem and Zayis. I tell you why I don't like that answer, because when you turn to Hilchos Shabbos, so you'd expect him, maybe he'll mention something over there that you should use Shem and Zayis. No. He doesn't mention it there either. Interestingly, the next piece of Gemara that I did not read to you is the Gemara goes on to say, if you're preparing ink for writing tefillin, Shem and Zayis is the best kind of ingredient to create that ink. Does the Rambam mention that? Also not. So I'll tell you what I think, and in a moment I'm going to give you a much more sophisticated answer, as you're going to see as the class is going to unfold. But I'm going to give you the answer that is what's called the classic LOMDUS way of learning up the Rambam. We know that there are certain mitzvos that have what's called a hiddur, a way of making them more beautiful. So for example, I'm going to be putting on soon my talis. So my talis has a hiddur that it's made beautifully. It's a beautiful talis. My talis on Shabbos is even more beautiful. It has an atara made out of silver that used to belong to my father. That's called hiddur mitzvah. When you buy tefillin, my tefillin also is muhudar. And whenever we have an object of mitzvah, we try and make it as muhudar, as splendorous as it can possibly be. Lulav noya, a beautiful lulav. Also, all these things have to be pleasing to the eye. This is not written in the Rambam anywhere, because the Rambam felt that what's called hiddur mitzvah is not what's called a din in the mitzvah. It's not that the mitzvah of talis is that try and improve it and make it muhudar. That's not the way the Rambam sees it. You got a mitzvah called talis. There's a separate mitzvah called zeh keli v'anvehu, make mitzvahs beautiful. That's a totally different discussion. That's not for Hilchos Lulav. That's not for Hilchos Talis. And that's certainly not for Hilchos Shabbos or Hilchos Chanukah when we talk about the quality of oil. Whenever you can, make it muhudar, but that's not my business to write it over here. It's interesting that Chanukah has a special inyan called what's called Mahadrin and Mahadrim in a Mahadrin. The Mahadrin in Chanukah that we light the candle every single night, and we go up in numbers, that's called Mahadrin. Mahadrim and Mahadrin, machlokas between the Rambam and Tesis, between Ashkenaz and Sfarad, how actually we do Mahadrim and Mahadrin. The whole family lights. The bottom line is that's a unique halacha in Hilchos Chanukah. Just like I didn't mention Esrog on purpose, because there it's called the pre-eitz hadar. That's intrinsic in the mitzvah itself, that it has to be muhudar. But the general rule that, like for example over here, when you're choosing a fuel, use a beautiful fuel, that's not the Rambam's issue to mention it over here in his halachos. Let's go with that. In a few minutes' time, I'm going to give a totally different answer. But the bottom line is, the idea of using oil that is made out of olives is not mentioned in the Rambam, it's not mentioned in the Torah, and it's not mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch. And at the end of the day, it's still very puzzling. Who does mention olive oil? The Ramah. The Ramah is not coming on his own. The Ramah mentioned a bunch of Rishonim. I just quoted them to you. There's other Rishonim that speak about it as well. There's a famous essay of the Maharal of Prague in his Ner Mitzvah at the end. He has a whole attack. We forget that the Maharal was also a Rosh Yeshiva and also a Dayan. He has a whole attack against using wax candles. He holds that wax candles are forbidden to use on Hanukkah. He holds whatever. We're not going to discuss why. He holds what's called the avuka. It's like wax candles is always like a Havdalah candle, which you cannot use. That's not the minhag, as we all know, that the Maharal was outnumbered, because in Europe, everyone uses wax. That's just the way it is. So the Maharal's opinion is not taken into consideration. But the bottom line is that everyone mentions who is from Ashkenaz, the great Ashkenazi poskim say that olive oil is a mitzvah min hamuvcha. None of them mention specifically why that it's a mitzvah min hamuvcha connected to the Beis Hamikdash, except for one. Or at least I only found one. That was the Meiri. The Meiri, who, as you all know, is a Rishon from France. The Meiri comes along and says that the reason why you should use olive oil is because it's a mitzvah min hamuvchar. It is a preferable one. Where does he mention it? At the very beginning of the Gemara, when the Gemara introduces Chanukah and speaks about the nature of Chanukah. There he talks over that you should use the olive oil mitzvah min hamuvchar, and there he quotes our Gemara and says, because Rabbi Shuv and Levi says that it's a mitzvah min hamuvchar to use olive oil, because that's what we had in the Beis Hamikdash, says the Meiri. Who brings this idea down? The Mishnah Berurah. Okay, our good friend, the Mishnah Berurah, the Chafetz Chaim, brings it down in Sifkat and Talad. He doesn't quote the Meiri. I'm not sure. I don't know. My scholar friends over here, Rabbi Friedman, Rabbi Chol, I don't know. Did the Chafetz Chaim see the Meiri? I don't know. But he brings down. He says, Al Yedei Hashemim Na'aseh Nes, and the Shari Tzion does not bring the Meiri. He says it explicitly, but rather he brings other Rishonim, Chuvas Meiri Bruna, Das the Maharal of Prague, and he also brings down over here the Machzis Shekel. The bottom line is that the Ashkenaz Rishonim talk about Shem and Zayis. The Rokeach mentions Shem and Zayis, but the one that's explicit, that anchors it into the Beis Hamikdash, which is what we're looking for, is the Meiri. Okay, for those of you that have had enough of all this halachic discussion, let's have a quick summary of everything we've said so far. The bottom line is that we have basically two camps over here. The two camps are basically Ashkenaz and Sfarad. The Ashkenaz camp, they say lahalacha, they focus that not just shemen, but shemen zayis. They are pro olives. They mention it. The Sephardic camp, the Rambam, the Torah, the Shulchan Aruch, they don't mention at all anywhere that it has to be shemen zayis. No, they just talk about shemen. It's actually kind of ironic because geographically, the Sephardim had easy access to olive oil. The Rambam probably had olive oil every single day. He lived in Spain. He lived in North Africa. The Torah spent a lot of time in Greece. The Mechaber lived in Eretz Yisrael, right near I am now. As I'm going to go to shul now, I'm going to pass an olive tree. So olives is not a big deal. In Poland, where the Ramah lived, I don't know if he ever saw olive oil. If he did, they had to bring it in from Italy. It was not an easy thing to do. The Maharal lived in Prague. I'm not sure if he saw olive oil. I don't really know how these things worked. But the bottom line is that the idea of being the hiddur of olive oil because of the Beis Hamikdash, that's the Meiri, and that, according to me, is going to be the Maharal, and it's going to be the Rokeach, and it's going to be all the other great Ashkenazi Rishonim, and Tosfos as well doesn't mention the Beis Hamikdash, but Tosfos has no problem with what I'm saying, because he says, yeah, you should use Shem and Zayis if you can. It comes to the Rambam does not mention it. All he does is talk about that the mitzvah is with Shemen. So I want to share with you that there's some very deep ideas going on behind the scenes, and it's two different ways of looking at your little candles, Mitzvah Shem, this Sunday night when you light your first candles, two totally different things to be thinking about. Let's start off with the Rambam. So I just want to let's just get the Rambam. What am I doing? I'm not going to be lazy. We got the Rambam right here. There we go. Let's take out the Rambam and see what he has to say. What I'm about to tell with you is that there is a famous machlokas, right? My definition of famous is that everyone talks about it, about what it means, the Gemara over here that introduces to us the nature of what Chanukah is all about. So let's just read this together, if I can. The Gemara, those of you that have the Gemara in front of you, Kaf Aleph from the base, the discussion over there is the nature of the oils that you're supposed to use. That's the sugya. That's Bama Madlekim. In the middle, it says, my Chanukah. What is Chanukah all about? It's kind of like a strange thing. You're now in the middle of Masechah Shabbos. We're now mentioning fuels and oils, and suddenly we ask, what's Chanukah all about? It's not in the Mishnayos. It's not in the Gemara till now. It's not mentioned in Masechah's Brachos. The Gemara says you should know. B'kafei b'kislei, Yemei Chanukah, Tamin in it, there's 8 days of Chanukah. You shouldn't do Hespedim. Why? And it brings down the story. Why? Because the Greeks came into the Heichal, and they were the Tamei Kol Hashmanim Shebeheichal. They ruined all the oils. When the Chashmonaim beat them in the battles, so the Gemara is teaching us what you and I learned in kindergarten. They found a little vial of oil which had the Kohen Gadol stamp on it, enough for one day. Nasa b'neis, vidlikim imenu shmona yamim, l'shana acheres, kavum, v'asam, yamim tevim, b'halal v'hidah. It lasted for 8 days, and then subsequently they made a Yom Tov, b'halal v'hidah. Halal v'hidah. That was what the rabbis instituted back in the day. What Chanukah is all about. Halal, well, we know what halal is, and we know what hodah is. Why? Because Rashi tells us halal is the mitzvah to say halal. Hodah is the mitzvah to say what? Alanissim. So we have over here alanissim in Meiri, alanissim in Moedim, in benching and Shmona Esrei, that we say alanissim. That's how we give thanksgiving to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's Rashi. Now, it comes to the Rambam. So here we have again this great divide between the Rambam, the Sephardic world, and Rashi, the Ashkenaz world. He has that the mitzvah of saying Al Hanissim, he has it where? In Hilchos Brachos. It's not mentioned by Chanukah anywhere. By Chanukah, when he talks about the mitzvah Hodah, he says the mitzvah of Hodah is how you light candles. It's candle lighting. Candle lighting is the expression of Hodah. Now let's read this in the Rambam. Okay, it's right in front of me. And just out of interest, you should know that Hilchos Chanukah is 2 prakim, and the first parak is Hilchos Halal, and the second parak is Hilchos candle lighting. But Hilchos Halal begins very, very similar to our Gemara, but there's a little twist. B'mei b'bai sheni k'shemolchu yavam gazu gezeres al Yisrael. It talks about all the terrible things they did. We're not going to go through this. This time last year, I gave a class about Chanukah Gel. Those of you that remember last year, we spoke about Chanukah Gel, and then I gave another share about if you're a guest and you're in somebody else's house, what are the halachos? But it's all based on this Rambam over here. And at the end, he says there was a war, and then the Kohanim came along, and they killed the bad guys, and Klal Yisrael was saved, and we had a Jewish king that for 200 years, now Malchus returned to Klal Yisrael. And then it says that afterwards, when everything settled down, he says the rabbis got up, and they made a Yom Tov. This is Halacha Gimel. Hiskin chachamim sheba'is adar, sheyem shmeinis hayamim elu, shitchilasan milel chamish esrei b'Kislev, that the 25th of Kislev should be Yemei Simcha v'Halel. Okay, so that's the mitzvah of Halel. Umadliki behem aneris be'erev al Pisrei abatim v'cholai v'layla laharais v'legalais hanes. to go and show off the nature of this miracle. So what is the Rambam saying? The Rambam says that the purpose of lighting candles is to bring out the miracle of what happened on the battlefield. So let's stop and think about the Rambam saying over here. The Gemara says it's lahalel v'lahaydos. Here it says lahalel and to light candles. So the candle lighting corresponds to what? Is lahaydos. How do we give hodah? By lighting candles. What is the Rambam teaching us? The purpose of lighting candles is to bring out the miracle of what? Not that it lasted for 8 days. The miracle of the battlefield. That's what the Rambam says over here. So again, okay, this is a totally different way of looking at things. And by the way, this is the most healthiest way of looking at things. Because to be honest with you, to make a candle last for 8 days, every single Hasidic Rebbe worth his salt can pull off that trick. Honestly, okay, I have in front of me people like Rabbi Dave from Ottawa. In a pinch, he could probably pull off the same thing. What's the big deal? To make something last for 8 days, that's like standard practice for every Hasidic Rebbe. That's not the point of the miracle. The point of the miracle was that in the heat of the battlefield, with all the crazy stuff that went on, Hashem gave them a smile right there in the Kiddush, right there in the Heichal, to say to them in exactly the same way that I'm giving you this little smile, this little, Hashem, this thing's going to last for 8 days. The same me that shows that I can do miracles with Shemen, it's the same me doing miracles on the battlefield. This is exactly the point that's being made over here, is that the Shemen that we light is to teach us that in Galus, when we're fighting our enemies, and we're fighting battles, and everything is physical and earthly, and everything can be explained by tacticians and by people that do statistics, and we forget to see a Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Chanukah candle says, no, thank Hashem. And this, says the Sfas Emes, is that for 2,000 years, when we say, in Chanukah, we say that means lazman, that as we go through Galus for 2,000 years of darkness, we light those candles and we say that we're constantly winning battles on the battlefield, and it's always Hashem. The survival of the Jewish people is an ongoing Chanukah miracle. So it comes out that the way we say thank you to what happened to Hashem on the battlefield is dafka through those little candles. It's very interesting. I don't know why, I only noticed it this year. There's a thing called Maseches Seifrim. Maseches Seifrim is found in the back of the Gemara, I think in the back of Sanhedrin, the Maseches Ketanis, they have over here Maseches Seifrim, and there it brings down how you light candles, and it brings down something very interesting. I and most of you listening over here have a custom that after you've lit the first candle, the second one, we start singing a song. Haneri Salalu Anu Madlikim. I sing my father's nigun, his father's nigun, and my family sings with. And it's a beautiful song. As I'm lighting the rest of the candles, and we say Kidei Lahaydos Ulahalo. The Maseches Seifrim says that this song that we sing should be said with the lighting of the first bracha, almost as if it's a continuation of lighting the first bracha, but his version is only Kidei Lahaydos. I'm lighting Kidei Lahaydos. For what? The miracle in the battlefield. It's crazy, but that's what the Maseches Seifrim brings down. This is exactly how I explain the Rambam. Whoa, let's take stock of what just happened over here. It comes out that if we're correct, that the Rambam does not need Shemen zayis. Rambam just needs Shemen, because Shemen is the fuel of the miracle. Everything that you learned about oil, excuse me, that was a mistake. I didn't mean to say the word olive, about oil, Shemen. Shemen is the fuel of miracles. So here already the Maral takes over. Maral tells us what is special about Shemen. Oil always rises to the top. Oil cannot mix with anything else. Oil is something that represents spirituality because it rises just like fire. Candle, the light of the candles goes up. Olive always goes up. Excuse me, I keep on saying olive. Oil always goes up. Every type of oil always goes up, representing, see the higher hand in what's going on. What's the Hebrew word for oil? Says the Maral, shemen. Shemen is shmona, the number 8. What's the number 8? So we learned this in kindergarten. Everything in the physical world is sevens. Hashem created the world in 7 days. 8 is beyond. 8 is the world of bris milah. 8 is the world where Akash Baruch Hu says the Jewish people are going to have special treatment beyond the laws of nature. The Chassan Sofer says that the word Chashmanai, Hasmanian, began with this miracle because Chashman is Ches Shemen. The Shemen lasted for 8 days. So they changed their name. Their names of royalty, calling themselves Chashmanai, was to celebrate that the miracle in the battlefield was symbolized that the shemen lasts for 8 days. Shemen is the food in what's called the world of what's called the world of nature, of all the, for sure with the 7 species. Shemen is the one that is the elevated fruit. It's the one that rises always to the top. It's the one that's connected to the world Shemona. So let's summarize what we have over here. The Rambam's camp, when they light their candles, the main focus is that it's shemen. Shemen zayis, very secondary. You want shemen zayis? The main reason why you use shemen zayis because maybe it's going to be a clearer light for you. It comes out prettier. But the Rambam doesn't mention that at all. The main thing is to make sure you have shemen. Shemen elevates. Shemen is how we give thanks, God giving to Kadosh Baruch Hu for the miracles in the battlefield as is Fasemes, and this is ongoing throughout Golus. So today in 2022, you should look around, read the newspapers, see a little bit deeply, and you'll see Chanukah miracles. You'll see Kadosh Baruch Hu is interfering with nature all the time. All you have to do is follow Israeli and American politics, and you know there's a higher hand moving everyone around like little puppets. The bottom line, that's the Rambam. Let's switch over to Rashi. So Rashi and the Tesis, and very, very explicitly the Meiri, they say no, focus on shemen zayis. Shemen zayis. Focus on the fact that it's olives. What do they want? So there's something that we did not mention at all about the nature of the Chanukah miracle, that shemen zayis is the shemen zayis of the menorah. The menorah represents another dimension of the Chanukah story. And that is the victory of the menorah over the Greeks. What is the menorah all about? The menorah represents the chachma, the wisdom of Torah Sheba'al Peh. Olives has, in the language of the rabbis, especially once you get into Hasidus, and especially when you go into what's called the Kabbalah farm, the mystical farm, that shemen zayis represents chachma, the higher wisdom. The chachma of Torah Sheba'al Peh that wins a battle over the Greeks, that is shemen zayis. That's specifically the menorah. So we just switched the story. We switched the narrative. Now we're discussing something completely different. When you light your first candle, and this is not a mitzvah of Hidah for the battlefield. It's not a mitzvah of Hidah at all. We're lighting a victory of our way of thinking over their way of thinking. How do you get to the Chachma of Torah? Through shemen zayis. Shemen zayis has to be crushed. This is something that all the Musar rabbis are telling their students now. You want to be a Chashmanai, you have to crush yourself, meaning the pure oil has to come out. I'm taking the olives and crushing it down. Out comes the purity. Every person that wants to reach spiritual purity in their wisdom, a little bit, you have to crush your physicality. The challenge, every single Torah scholar has to reach that level Kul Shemen has to a little crush his physicality. You can't study Gemara with your feet up, with an Askal Gemara, and relaxing and taking breaks all the time. It's not going to work. You have to push your physical body, and then comes out the pure oil. And there's a lot of other things going on as well behind the scenes about the nature of Shemen and Chachma. I want to share with you one big idea, and then we're going to summarize and bring this share to a close and ask ourselves, what can we gain out of this? I have over here a statement. Let me just find it over here. Here we go. Here we go. Oh, I forgot to mention a lot of things, but it's okay. It'll have to wait for another time. I'll have to wait for another time. I've run out of time over here. But the bottom line is that, let's go back over here to the world of Chachma. I have in front of me a Gemara in Brachas, Nun Zayin Amud Aleph. For those of you who are in my Gemara share for Shabbos, before Shabbos we learned Brachas. If you remember, at the end of the Brachas, this was called the Gemaras that talk about dreams. What happens if you have dreams of interesting things? So there's a whole section that interprets our dreams. What happens if you dream about Shemen Zayis? You dream about olive oil. Now what? So the Gemara actually talks about dreaming of olives, but it's clearly connected to olive oil. Haroy Zayis b'chalaim. So the Gemara brings an answer. Shem Toiv Yotzilai. He's going to get a good name. Shem Toiv Yotzilai. He's going to get a good name. So my Rabbi Moshe Shapiro explained the Gemara. What do you mean a good name? What does it mean, good name? So my Rabbi says, we know what a good name is because the Mishnayos in Pirkei Avos talks about Keser Shem Toiv, the crown of a good name. And the Maral in Derech Chaim, in the third parak, on what says the Keser of Torah and the Keser of Kahuna and the Keser of Malchus, he says Torah corresponds to the Aron HaKodesh. Kahuna corresponds to the Mizbeach. It makes sense. The Aron HaKodesh is the Makor of Torah Shebiksav. The Kahuna is the Avodah of the Kohanim, is the Mizbeach. Malchus, that's the Shulchan. Okay, we know that. Shulchan Malachim. So what's the Kesed Shem Tzai that's Oila al Gabehem? Says the Maral, that's the Menorah. Whoa, what just happened over here? You dream about olives, so you're dreaming about the Menorah. So the Maral explains that the Menorah, so to speak, is the one that is encompassing and connects together the other three. The Menorah represents the wisdom of Torah Shebal Peh. The Torah Shebal Peh is the great ring that binds together Torah, which means Torah Shebiksav, Malchus, which corresponds to the Shulchan, and the Kahuna, which corresponds to the Mizbeach. It's very interesting. And I was actually at a hesped in Memphis, Tennessee, of a person who was not a Torah scholar. And the rabbi got up and says, but he had a Shem Tov, he had a good name. And that's greater than everything. The Maral is telling us that's not what a Kesed Shem Tov is. The Shem Tov, the essence that is truly Tov, is when your whole essence connects all the other three things and puts them together. Oil al Gabev, it's higher than all of them. That represents the oil of the menorah. So my Rebbe quoted the Gra, and this Gra for me is something, it's just astounding about the nature of Shem and Zayis. The Shem and Zayis is the wisdom of Torah, is the wisdom that connects everything, not just the three different parts of the Beis Hamikdash that we just mentioned, the Aron HaKodesh, the Mizbeach of the Karbanos, and the Shulchan Malachim that was in the Heichal. No, the olive oil representing the wisdom of Torah that comes out of the Menorah represents all of history. Says the Vilna Gaon, the genius of the Vilna Gaon, Zayis is Gematria, Zayin Yud Tov, 417, is the same Gematria of Adam, Adam, David, and Mashiach. Right, Adam itself is Aleph, Daled, Mem. Adam, David, Mashiach. Adam is the original man. David is the one that brought tshuva and brought malchus, and Mashiach closes everything. So you have the beginning, the middle, and the end of time. Adam David Mashiach. Adam is 45, David is 14, Mashiach is 358. Together makes zayis. Oh my gosh. It's a whole different way of looking at the power of the olive oil, which is the, so to speak, the representative in nature of the Chachma Eloi, that great wisdom called Talmud. So for me, and this is me speaking, trying to wrap everything up for us. For me, when I think of Shem and Zayis, so I always like to say this over, it's my own var, I never saw this explicit anywhere else. Shem and Zayis, when I light Mr. Shem on Sunday night, my Shem and Zayis, I'm connecting to Zayis that goes from the beginning of time to the end of time. How does that work? So we all know that the Rambam tells us that when I light candles, I'm connecting to the candles that were lit in the Beis HaMikdash. It's the only chance that Menachem Nissel has to be a Kohen Gadol. The Ramban and Baal Leisa says was the great nachas that the Aaron HaKohen had when they did the dedication of the Mishkan, that he lighting the candles that would last to the end of time. So my little olive oil connects to the olive oil of the Chanukah story, which connects to the olive oil of the Meiri, which we mentioned before and goes back to Shmuel Navi. Well, guess what? The miracle that happened to the Chashmonaim that was found in the Beis HaMikdash that was once belonging to the Beis Din of Shmuel, that was something that goes all the way back to whom? To Yaakov Avinu, who says this is the Ishbitzer, the Torah of Ishbitz. Yaakov goes for the Pachim Ketanim. Those Pachim Ketanim were Pachim Ketanim of oil. That oil was the oil that would be the oil of the future miracle that Shmuel would pass on all the way to the Chashmonaim. Where did Yaakov get that magic oil from? So this is a little bit me making the connection. He also had it as a Messiah from his father Yitzchak, who got it from Avraham Avinu, who got it, or maybe it went directly from Shem Be'aver, maybe it was from Shem. Yaakov got it from Shem, and Shem got it from his father Noach. Where did Noach get it from? He got it because Noach created it in the first place when he sent out the Yonah to get something to see if there was life out there. The Yonah came back with olives. Where were those olives from? So the Ramban brings down it's from the Medrash, was from Gan Eden. Some say Eretz Yisrael, but it was from Gan Eden. Gan Eden had olive trees. It comes out that the olive trees of Gan Eden was actually connected through the Yonah to Noach, which is connected to Yaakov Avinu, which is connected to Shmuel HaNavi, which is connected to the miracle of the Chashmonaim, which then, says the Ramban, is connected to Menachem Nissel, and every single one of you when you light your candles. So we talk about the Chachma Eloi, this higher wisdom that Shem and Zayis represents, from the beginning of time to the end of time, and the end of time, Mashiach, which is again, says the Gra, Mashiach is Adam, David, Mashiach will bring it back to the Meiri, will complete the circle and bring everything back to its original makar. How incredible is this? Mitzvah Hashem, this Sunday night, we're going to light those little candles. And I'm asking you to split your brain. Rambam, Rashi, okay? The two different camps. The Rambam, focus on the Shemen. Focus and reminding yourself that everything you're going through in your life, and there's so many tzaras today. Do I have to tell you about tzaras? We all know in our backyard how many tzaras there are. In Chanukah we say, remember the higher hand. Remember the Shemen that goes up. Remember that after the battles that they had back then, Hashem smiled at us and said, no, it's all me. Is to see Hashem in our lives. To see Hashem in the bitter darkness of Galus, that those little candles should light things up and say, no, it's all Hashem, exactly like it was when we came out of Egypt. And then to remember how privileged we are to be part of what's called the Torah Shabbat Peh, this higher Shem and Zayis that represents the Chachma that is more powerful than all the evil of Chachmas of Yavam, the Chachma of the Greek philosophers that created a world without Hashem, that we belong to something that goes all the way back to Har Sinai, all the way back to the beginning of time, through the Shem and the zayis that we believe in, that we hold on to this thing called the Chachma of Shem and Zayis, the Chachma of Torah Shebaal Peh, so we can go and head and greet the Melech HaMashiach. So I want to say to every single one of you, in Mitzvah Shem, your little candle that you have is not really that little at all. It's just a little candle, but your little candle and my little candle are holding these secrets inside of them. We light them. We should learn with a tremendous simcha and a tremendous hodah to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And with that, we should have a tefillah, a prayer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that all our little candles should connect, because we want so desperately that all the little Shem and Zayis and all the little candles that we have should connect and create a huge, big, massive light. And that light will be the light of the Melech HaMashiach. And that light will bring us back to the original light of Gan Eden, which goes back to those 36 hours of the Or HaGanos, which corresponds to the 36 candles that we light over Chanukah. And we can enjoy and the power of this incredible, incredible light. We should be here via menu. Thank you so much for listening. I wish you a lichtige Chanukah, a light-filled Chanukah, a light-filled life, a light-filled, pushing away the gullus as we greet the Melech HaShiach, who shows us the ultimate light. Thank you so much again. I wish you all a good Chanukah and a good Shabbos. Thank you.